welcome to our February box. It's February 2025. It's 5 o'clock in the UK and it's still light. So this is our winter box, but spring is on its way, which is exciting. So we're going to be stitching this design, and this is from an illustration by a designer called Keely Rays. She's a US designer, and I just love this illustration that I found on Pinterest. So we've translated it into embroidery, and there are loads of different stitches in here, hopefully some new ones that you haven't tried before. It's a wordy embroidery. Abundance is a mindset, and I know wordy embroidery is always a little bit controversial. Not everyone connects with the words that you put on an embroidery, so they're tricky. Some people don't like them, but if you're here and you do like these words, then gratitude and having an abundance mindset is just something that I've been learning about so much over the last 10 years. I think it's just the key to a happier life. And so I wanted to do an embroidery that really helped people meditate on that and really take that in. And as you're stitching the words, I just really hope that you're listing all the things that you're thankful for and remembering to have that mindset of abundance and seeing all the good things in your life. I read a really good book about this a few years ago called The Gap and the Gain, and it just talks about the power of focusing on the gain rather than the gap. So in terms of thinking about kind of what you're reaching for or things you want to achieve, it's always much more motivating to focus on what you've achieved rather than how long you've got to go or the gap that you've still got left to achieve. So yeah, it's all about abundance. We're thinking about abundance and stitching abundance. So I hope you like it. I'm going to take you through it step by step and show you all the different stitches that are in this one. So comment on the Facebook group, put your work in progress up there. We would love to see it. I think loads of people are going to customize this one and add in their own colors. So I'm excited to see that. But I'm going to take you through it now. We'll go through what's in the box and I hope you enjoy it. What I forgot to say is that we've also put in the magazine a tutorial for these quilted baubles that you might have seen me make on Instagram. They're so beautiful, so I wanted to include a little step-by-step guide as to how to make these, but I will do a separate tutorial for these as well and show you how to make them. So in the box we have our gorgeous thread. You're going to get 4 skeins. I've only got 3 here because I've used one to stitch. You're going to get your needle. We have included a lovely little affirmation card, so you're all going to get a different one, but hopefully that will speak to you and just be a little extra little affirmation for you when you open your box. So we have this cute little notebook that is from a British manufacturer, and you can use it for anything, but I thought it'd be a cute little gratitude book for people to write down their 3 things that they're grateful for in line with our abundance theme of this box. You of course get your hoop, your printed fabric, your instruction booklet and your backing disc and your wadding, which also isn't in this sample box but will be in yours. So all of your instructions are in here, all of the stitch diagrams that you're going to need, and a little interview with the designer as well, and the tutorial for the folded fabric baubles. So the first thing we do is get our fabric in the hoop. You're going to lay the fabric on the table or surface and then unscrew the hoop. Then you put the smaller hoop underneath and then press the larger one over the top, trying to get the design central, but if it's not, you can always move it later. Don't worry about that. And then we're going to tighten the screw. So some hoops have a screw fastening, and we did one of the extra gifts in a lemon box, I think it was a little screwdriver to help you tighten your screw, but the particular hoops that we sent out didn't have a screw fastening, so some don't, in which case you can sometimes get a pair of little mini pliers and tighten this, because sometimes it is quite hard to tighten it with just your hands. So because you want it so tight, because it's going to be so much easier to stitch and get lovely
tensioned stitches if your fabric is super tight. So just work as hard as you can to get that really drum tight, and as soon as you are happy with that, we'll start stitching. We're going to use a length of about 40 centimeters, not too long because you don't want to get in a tangle, and you can generally pull from the end with the number on. You can pull a length of thread and the thread will stay nice and neat in there. Now most kits require you to split your embroidery thread, and that gives us the ability to just change the thickness of the line that you're going to be stitching. So we're going to be stitching most of this kit with 3 strands. So I'm just going to gently pull apart my thread, and there are 6 strands in each length of thread. So we want to stitch with 3, so we're pulling half away. And then I'm going to thread my needle. I'm not going to tie the knot with both strands. I'm just going to leave a tail of 10 to 15 centimeters and then tie the knot at the bottom of one of the strands. You don't want to double up the thread again, or you will be stitching with 6 strands, and that's not what we want. So we're ready to stitch. You can start anywhere on here, and I generally jump around because I don't want to do too much of one stitch. I want to just enjoy kind of going around and doing different stitches, but you can start anywhere. I'm going to start on the letters, and I'm going to show you how to do the split back stitch that we're using for these letters.
So split back stitch is just like a normal back stitch, but instead of going back down at the end of the last stitch, you're going to go back down through the middle of the last stitch. So I've just done one little stitch there, about 2 millimeters long, and we're going to be outlining the letters and then gradually working our way in. So I'm coming up about half the length of that first stitch away, so about 1 to 2 millimeters, and then I'm coming back down with my needle right through the middle of that previous stitch. I'll do a bit more of a close-up as well, but I'll just explain it. So then coming up again, you're kind of going back on yourself all the time, hence the name, back stitch, and then always back down the previous stitch. The only exception is when you're going around a really sharp corner, you can't always go back down the previous stitch. So when you get to a sharp corner, just do a normal back stitch to redirect your thread, and then carry on doing the split back stitch. And this just gives a very, this is my favorite stitch, it gives a very chain stitch like effect. It's great for filling areas, and it looks so much more difficult than I feel like it is. It's one of the easiest stitches. So just try and keep your stitches nice and small, and then we're going to outline the letter, and then we're going to just keep doing rows and rows of split back stitch to fill the letters. So just gradually working inwards, fill the letters. So a bit more of a close-up. Coming up away from your last stitch, then going back down, just right through the middle. You don't need to worry about whether you're going right through the middle thread, just stab that previous stitch. And keep going just like that. So this is what your letters are going to end up looking like, just lovely lines of backstitch filling them up. So just work from the outside in and fill those up, not leaving any fabric to show through. We're also doing split back stitch on some of the flowers. So some of the flowers that don't have any filling in them are going to be split back stitch all the way around, so just a single line. So flowers like that, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one will be
split back stitch. So we're just using it as an outline stitch for those, as opposed to the filling stitch. But you're doing exactly the same thing. Start from wherever you want to start and just small as you can. The smaller the stitches, the better you're able to go around corners and things like that, and better define the shape that you're following. Bigger stitches will just look a bit too angled and you won't be able to get the nuance of any kind of shape. So the smaller you stitch, the better really. Just following the printed line and covering that up with your stitches. So that's a really easy one to start with. You can really switch off and just do all the split back stitch. So here I'll show you, I'm going around a corner, and because I can't really, if I go back through that last stitch, it's going to make the angle wrong. So I'm just going to use a normal back stitch so that I can get the angle right. And then I'll carry on now with my split back stitch. Now we're going to go on to reverse chain stitch, which is how you fill these solid flowers. So I'm going to show you how to do it, but always remember that in the instruction booklet we've got diagrams for each stitch. So if you need a little bit more explanation of how to do a stitch, then go and have a look at that. Reverse chain stitch is a much easier way of doing a chain stitch, I think, once you get going. So again, we're going to start from the outside in. We're going to go around the edge of this flower, and the key to starting reverse chain stitch is you need to do a little anchor stitch, a tiny stitch, as small as you can, and that is going to hold our first stitch. So I've done that stitch there. I'm going to come up about 1 to 2 millimeters away from that, and I'm going to go through that stitch to anchor my stitch. Then I'm coming back down next to where I first came up. And from now on, the previous stitch is always going to be your anchor stitch. So you just needed that first one to start with. So I come up again, and then I push my needle through the last stitch. So I come up again, and then I push my needle through that first stitch, which has now become my anchor. And then I'm going back down next to the previous stitch that I came up by. So you're making these little loops that always get anchored by the previous stitch. So coming up again, going through that stitch and back down again next to the previous one. So you'll start to see this little chain forming, and in the same way that we filled the letters, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just start from the outside and then keep going around in smaller and smaller circles till we filled the flower. But just gives you a slightly different texture, slightly different look, and I think it's a nice fun stitch to do. So hopefully you can see we're just making loops that are secured by the previous stitch. So this is what your solid flower is going to look like, just lines and lines of semicircles going round. Okay, we're on to surface blanket stitch. So this is normally a stitch that you do on the edge of a blanket, but we are doing it on the surface. So I'm starting on this inner circle of petals, and I've come up on the outside here. So that's
point 1. Now I'm going to go back down here. This is point 2. And this loop is going to form that shape that you can see of the petal. So I need to come up at this corner of the petal, because that's going to then hold the shape of that L, that upside down L. So then we're at point 1 again. So I'm going to go down. Think of the petal shapes as kind of a square with 4 points. I'm going to go down again. I'm going to pull that through but leave a loop, because I'm going to come up at this point, 3, which then becomes 1, if that makes sense. And that's made my second L shape. So you need to kind of tug it that way, otherwise it won't make the right shape. So I'm going down at the bottom corner and up at the top corner. So your stitch is always made using part of the previous stitch, if that makes sense. So down at the bottom, I nearly did it wrong, up at the top corner. Now, because each stitch is made complete by using the downward side of the previous stitch, when you get to an end, you will have to just put in a straight stitch to complete the chain, because we're not going to do another stitch, if that makes sense. At some point you will always have to just add in a stitch to complete the chain. So I'll just show you again. I'm going down at the bottom corner, up at the top corner to catch my loop, down at the bottom corner, and up at the top corner, catching my loop. Now this one, so that's where we're finishing with that one, and the rest of this petal comes in, but we need just a finishing loop here. So I'm going to go down, I'm going to secure that stitch there so that doesn't move, and then I'm going to come up and just do a straight stitch to complete that line. So you do need, and stitches need to be quite tight so they don't fall in on themselves. That, and then we'll start here again. We're coming up at point 1, down at point 2, and then catching the loop to make an L shape, and pulling it round. This one might take a bit of practice. This is probably the trickiest one. Once you get into the rhythm. So just keep going round, keep adding in straight stitches when you get to the end of a row, and just keep filling that up with lovely L-shaped blanket stitches. So this is what they're going to look like, just a lovely web of stitches all held down by each other. So next we have some just very simple back stitch. So these lovely striped petals are stitched using back stitch. We normally tell you to keep your back stitches quite small, but here I'm gonna say do 3 big stitches along these lines, and it just gives you a nice elegant look to these striped petals. You can, of course, choose to do your own thing and choose to do smaller stitches if you want. So the back stitch is very similar to the split back stitch, but you do your stitch and then you start doing your going back on yourself, but instead of going right down the middle, you go down the hole where your last stitch was. So that makes a nice continuous line. You shouldn't see a gap between your back stitches. So I'm doing 3 stitches along the long line of the petals, roughly 3. Going back down the hole that the previous stitch came up at. And then I'll go back down this stripe. And then we're going to use back stitch to do this the whole stripy flower bit. So you will need to do some extra stitches kind of around the top if you've got any gaps, and then around the middle of the flower as well. So keep doing your back stitch that way as well. So that is the completed back stitch, just 3 stitches and then edged with back stitch as well. Now we're going to come to French knots. So French knots are used to fill these little circles in these flowers, and French knots will be part of the pistil stitch that we're doing just a tiny bit of here, just to show you what a pistil stitch is. But a French knot is the first part of a pistil stitch, so we'll do the French knots first. And lots of people are scared of these, but I find once you've cracked it, you will be fine. So we can vary the thickness of our knots and the size of our knots depending on how many times you go round your needle. So you come up through the fabric and you're with your left hand, or your right hand if you're left-handed, you hold that bit of the fabric of the thread tight. Now I'm going to place my needle on top of the thread and I'm going to go round 2, 3. I'm going to go around 4 times because I want quite a big French knot here. And I'm going back down almost next to where the thread came up with my needle, holding that tight still until the knot is formed. So you can choose to do, this is a bit of a bigger one, so I'm going to go around 6 times on this one. So again, I'm holding my thread tight, I'm placing my needle on top of the thread and going round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a big one. And then back down. You can see how that knot is going to be just caught there. So that is French knots. For the smaller ones, just go round once or twice. So these tiny ones, I'm just going to go round, I'll go round twice. So I'm holding my thread tight, put the needle on the top and going round 2 times, then going back down almost next to where that thread has come up to start with, and holding it tight and then pulling my knot. So they are your French knots. So just fill these with varying sizes of French knots. And this is what they're going to look like. You can alternatively, if you do really hate French knots, you can do this section in satin stitch. You could just do little stitches next to each other. The instructions for satin stitch are in the leaflet, and I will go through these as well, through them. But you could replace the French knots with satin stitch if you really hated them. Now, Pistil Stitch is a stitch we've not done before, and it's really easy. It's basically a French knot, but you leave a long tail, so you don't go down back through the same hole that you came up with. You go down further along the fabric. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to hold the thread tight and go round. We're going to go around 3 times, and then I'm going to go down there at the edge, and you just get this lovely little stitch that's got a little ball on the end. So I'm going to come up through the middle again, holding my thread tight. I'm going to go round. I think I went round 2 times. I can't remember. Oh my goodness. I might have gone round 3 times. Back down, holding your thread tight. That is a really cute stitch, isn't it? You could do so much with that. You could do lots of lovely flowers with that. Flower centres, I really like that one. So that's what it's going to look like in the end, just lots of little lines with balls around the edge. And this is split back stitch. So we do have some satin stitch in the design as well. We've got satin stitch in the centre of these flowers, this one here, and then this little leaf is satin stitch as well. So I'm just going to show you how to leave this, to stitch this leaf. It's important to make sure you leave some of that white space so that you can see that it's a leaf. But satin stitch is just a group of stitches that you lay very close together, all in the same direction. So I'm going with the direction of the leaf. I'm filling this shape. I'm not initially putting them right next to each other. I'm spreading them out, and then I'm going to come back later and go up and down the shape and just keep filling in. This bottom bit is the trickiest bit to have started with. The bigger bits will be easier to show you. But then you're just laying down stitches. I'm going to go back and fill in the gaps, laying down stitches next to each other so that you end up with a lovely smooth satiny finish. So just keep adding in stitches until you're happy it looks thick and full and there are no gaps. But yes, remember to not start too close to the edge of each of the shapes so that you lose that white space. So I could carry on with that one, but I'm going to start on this next one. I'm just going to make sure I don't start really close to the edge, because I want to be able to see the white line in between. And then again, just laying down my stitches in the same direction, going with the diagonal of the flower, of the leaf, doing an initial set of stitches and then coming back and filling them in. Just taking care when I get to the edges that I'm not going too far over the printed fab design so that the white spaces show up. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do. It still looks like a leaf. I really like that white space. I think that looks really cool. So you can keep going much longer than me, adding in stitches to make it look really thick and full. And then we've got some more satin stitch here. So we're going to just do exactly the same thing. We're going to go fill this shape by laying down stitches next to each other. Just gradually making them smaller as I get to the edge of the circle. Most of you will have done satin stitch before, I imagine. So keep going back, up and down that shape to fill it out nicely. That's just the first go, but that shows you the technique. And then the final stitch is seed stitch. So this is a lovely little one. For the center of these flowers, we're going to just do random little stitches. So you come up and down with your thread, and it's like you are scattering seeds. So you're just in a very random manner changing the direction of your stitches so they look just random and like someone has just sprinkled seeds. You come up and down. You can do them as big or as small as you like. You can do as many or as few as you like, but the idea of this stitch is just random little marks with the thread to create the inside of the flower. So I quite like the look of it with quite a lot of white space. I think that looks nice where you just do a few, but you could fill it and do loads of little stitches. Depends on the look that you want. See, I quite like that as a just quite an understated amount of stitches. Maybe one more here. And that is seed stitch, and that is all the stitches that we use to complete this kit. So I'm going to show you how to finish off the back when you've completed your stitching. So we've finished our design. It's nice and tight in the hoop, and we're going to put the wadding and the cardboard back in our hoop. So this is just gonna, lots of people say, how do you frame the embroideries? What do you do with it when you're finished? And I basically leave it in the hoop because I just think that's just a very cute little frame, a very cute way of displaying it. So you cut off the excess fabric. You don't cut it too short because you're folding this back in behind itself. So it's about 2 centimeters, 2-3 centimeters. Don't fold it too short. Don't cut it too short. So the next you're going to cut round the wadding to the shape of the cardboard backing disc. Then we put our wadding in the back of the hoop. This just gives it such a lovely quilted look. So nice when you finish. And then fold the fabric under, and then simply squeeze that cardboard into the back of the hoop. And what you're left with is just the most lovely, quilted, beautiful piece of embroidery that you can display and you can pin on the wall. Or what we've really recently discovered is these IKEA phone holders make really cute little embroidery stands. So you could display that on your mantelpiece or your fireplace. I just think that looks so cute. So that is our Abundance is a Mindset kit. If you've got any questions, probably don't comment on the YouTube video because I rarely check those, but email us hoopclub@cottonclara or send us a message on Instagram.